Hello, Year Threes. We're going to read the next chapter of The Train to Impossible Places. I like the look of this one. There's a really good picture in this one. I'll show you when we get to it. Chapter 16, The Underside. I've got an idea, said Wilmot, leading Susie away from the post office and back across the bustling square, dodging traffic as they went. They arrived at a narrow building clad in white and green tiles, with a large red neon sign above the entrance that read, Underside. Beneath this were two doorways, one labelled down and the other up. Trolls streamed into the first and out of the second, and Wilmot only slowed his pace as they joined the small throng pushing its way towards the down door. Where are we going? She said. To find one of the posties who deposited a fact of entry, he said. They'll be able to withdraw it for us, so we can get into the ivory tower. What sort of facts are they? They could be anything, any piece of information known only to the person who deposited it. It's the price required for the ivory tower in exchange for its own information. They won't even let us in without one. They're pretty rare, so whenever a postie found themselves with one, they'd seal it in the post office vault. So they could withdraw it again if they ever needed to make a delivery to the ivory tower, she said. Clever. All we need is the right postie, he said, and I know just the place to look. Next stop, the underside. Susie tried to make herself as small as possible as they stepped in through the down doorway and onto a narrow spiral staircase of wrought iron that had been obviously made for trolls in mind. She had to stoop to avoid grazing her scalp on the low ceiling. Hundreds of work boots rang out on the stairs, and a chaos of troll voices echoed off the walls. The crowd swept on, forcing her further down the tight curve. What's the underside? She shouted. Yes, I know, Wilmot shouted back, cupping a hand to his mouth. Very noisy. Susie grimaced and covered her ears as the cloud carried them deep below ground level. She was beginning to feel uncomfortable echoes of the claustrophobia she had experienced in the diving suit, until all of a sudden the walls surrounding them were gone, and the staircase was descending through an echoey space the size of a large aircraft hangar. Susie gawped in astonishment. It was some sort of factory, but its machines were still and silent, and the whole space was cloaked in shadows and dust. In the vague distance she could dimly see other staircases, like theirs, spiralling down through the darkness. The sound of thousands of footsteps rang like a great dull bell in the huge space. Susie tapped Wilmot on the shoulder. Is this where we're going? She shouted in his ear. No, he called back. This is the old manufacturing level. It's where we used to make technology for the whole Union. He gestured to the broken machines. But these past few years, it's all fallen apart. Not the machines, he added hurriedly, although that does sometimes happen. I mean everything else. Nobody wants troll tech anymore. Nobody wants the postal service. Everything we do is starting to, well, stop. Susie looked again at the trolls surrounding them, realised they too were looking out into the factory with expressions of resignation and sadness. Trying to fend off her mounting unease, Susie reached into her pocket and, after making sure Wilmot wasn't looking, pulled out the snow globe and held it to her mouth. Frederick, she whispered, if we make it to the ivory tower, what happens then? How are you going to break the curse? She moved the snow globe to her ear, was just able to make out Frederick's reply over the dim. I've already told you, he said, with magic. But you're trapped in the snow globe. You haven't even got any hands. That's easy, he retorted. You're going to do it for me. Me? She almost raised her voice in surprise. But I don't know any magic. Really? Then why are you carrying that wand about? What wand? The one in your pocket keeps shoving into me, of course. The wheels of Susie's mind spun fruitlessly for a few seconds. What on earth could he be talking about? The only thing in her dressing gown pocket was that bit of metal I took from Fletch, she said. I thought it was some sort of tool. A troll wand is a tool, he said, and a very basic one. Not much more than a blunt instrument, really, but it might still be useful. Anyone can perform magic if they have the will, the knowledge, and the wand. We've got 2 out of 3 already, and if we ever make it out of here, we might just get the 3rd. There's a book at the ivory tower that can help us. Harmful spells and how to break them. It'll tell you everything you need to know. Susie returned Frederick to her pocket, where she felt the cold length of the wand against her fingers. It didn't feel very magic, but Frederick's words had sparked a new worry. If she didn't make it home, not only would her mum and dad be frantic about her going missing, they'd also find themselves living in a house that was bigger on the inside, 2 open tunnels in the hallway. Because what was it Fletch had said about before she jumped onto the train? Can't do the job without it. She'd taken his wand. How was he supposed to put the house back to normal if he couldn't use magic? She remained preoccupied with the question as the stairs carried them down through a factory floor and the walls closed in again. Almost there, shouted Wilmot. Thank goodness, said Susie. I'm not used to being in the deep underground. He gave her a curious look. Not underground, he said. She was about to tell him how ridiculous that was. Of course we're underground. Where else could they be? When the stairs took them down into an opening again and into Daylight. Yes, dull and half-hearted perhaps, but definitely daylight. Susie looked around in confusion. Before she could process what she was seeing, the stairs ended, and she stumbled off them onto a metal walkway, bumping into half a dozen trolls as she did so. "You all right?" Wilmot said, turning to her with concern. She didn't answer. She couldn't take her eyes off what she was seeing, nor could she believe it. She was not underground anymore. She was above it, a very, very long way above it. The walkway was suspended over a deep canyon, so deep she couldn't see the bottom, and so wide its rocky walls were hazy with distance. She staggered to the nearest handrail and clung to it, fighting the sudden onset of vertigo that threatened to make her legs go weak. "Where are we?" she gasped. "Are we in a new impossible place?" "Of course not," said Wilmot, in obvious confusion. "We're just on the underside, that's all." A gust of wind pulled at Susie's dressing gown. "But we're so high up," she said. "Where's Trollville?" Wilmot gave a chuckle of polite embarrassment. "It's exactly where we left it," he said, and he raised his eyes to the sky. Now, this is a fantastic picture. Hopefully you can see this. So they're on this walkway down the bottom, and above them is Trollville. And what do you notice? It's upside down. I wonder why that is. Except there was no sky, she realised as she followed his gaze. Instead of a vast expanse of stone, brick, and iron arched above their heads, at least a kilometre or so across, spanning the canyon like an immense dirty rainbow. Even more impossibly, Susie could see houses clinging to the underside of the arch. Lots of houses. An entire town, in fact. Shops and spires and blocks of flats, all hanging upside down from the arch like stalactites from a cave roof. Lights burned in windows, washing hung from lines, and trolls went about their business in the inverted streets as though everything were perfectly normal. Looking up at it gave Susie as much vertigo as looking down. "Susie, are you all right?" Wilmot put a hand on her arm. She shut her mouth, which had been hanging open, and blinked away her disbelief. "I'm seeing it," she said, "but I'm still not understanding it." "It's quite simple, really," said Wilmot, holding his hand out flat in front of him, palm facing down. "We were here on the overside." He tapped the back of his hand with his finger. "That's where all the civic buildings like the post office are. You know, the stuff we show the tourists," he grinned. "Then we came down through the superstructure." He drew his finger down the side of his hand towards the palm. "And now we're here, on the underside." He tapped his finger against his palm. "It's the residential district, all held up with negotiable gravity, of course." She took a moment to re-evaluate her surroundings. "The underside," she said, testing the name. Understanding was beginning to creep into the edges of her mind, but she still wasn't sure she believed it. "Wilmot, are we underneath a bridge?" Wilmot laughed. "Well, where else is the troll supposed to live?" When she didn't laugh back, he blinked at her in astonishment. "You mean you really didn't know?" She shook her head. "Oh." It took a moment for him to take this fact on board. "I'm sorry, I just sort of assumed you did. I mean, everyone knows that your entire city is a bridge." "The greatest troll bridge ever built," he said, puffing with pride. "The 4th bridge." The name made her start. "My world's got a 4th bridge as well. It's in Scotland." The tips of his ears twitched. "Oh, yes? How did you lose your first 3?" "I'm sorry?" "Our first bridge fell down," he said. "The 2nd bridge fell up. The 3rd bridge, well, nobody's quite sure what happened to that one, although bits of it still phase in and out of reality sometimes. But this one stood strong for centuries." "How?" she said. "A bridge this size shouldn't be able to exist. It should collapse under its own weight." He opened his mouth to answer, but she cut him off. "Don't tell me it uses magic, because that is cheating." He stood there with his mouth open for a few seconds before finally speaking. "It gets some extra lift from negotiable gravity. Let's just call it a testament to troll determination, shall we?" Susie smiled, but redoubled her grip on the railing. "Okay, let's do that," she said. "Now, where are we actually going?" So that's the end of that chapter. It's fantastic, that picture, wasn't it? I'll see you tomorrow.